Words can be just as dangerous as weapons. 32. The role of mental health in prison fights is often overlooked, but inmates with untreated mental illnesses may be more prone to violence or paranoia. In one case, an inmate with bipolar disorder attacked another inmate during a manic episode, believing that the man was a threat. The fight was chaotic and unpredictable, with the mentally ill inmate lashing out wildly before being subdued by guards. The incident highlighted the need for better mental health care in prisons, but resources remain scarce. 33. The use of space in prison fights is a strategic consideration, with inmates often choosing locations where they can maximize their advantage or minimize the risk of intervention. In one case, a fight broke out in a narrow hallway, where one inmate used the confined space to trap his opponent and deliver a series of brutal blows. The fight was short but intense, leaving the victim with serious injuries and the perpetrator with a reputation for cunning and ruthlessness. 34. The role of reputation in prison fights is crucial, with inmates often fighting to protect or enhance their standing within the prison hierarchy. In one case, an inmate challenged another to a fight after hearing rumors that the man had insulted him behind his back. The fight was fueled by a desire to defend one's honor and maintain respect, and it left both men bloodied and bruised. The incident served as a reminder that in prison, reputation is everything. 35. The use of alliances in prison fights is a common tactic, with inmates often banding together to take on a common enemy. In one case, a group of inmates ganged up on a rival, using their numbers to overwhelm him and deliver a brutal beating. The fight was motivated by a desire to assert dominance and send a message to others, and it left the victim with serious injuries. The incident highlighted the power of alliances in a world where strength in numbers often determines survival. 36. The role of fear in prison fights is a powerful motivator, with some inmates using intimidation to control their enemies or avoid conflict altogether. In one case, an inmate spread rumors about his violent past, causing others to fear him and avoid confrontation. When a fight finally broke out, the inmate used his reputation to his advantage, quickly subduing his opponent and solidifying his dominance. The incident served as a reminder that in prison, fear can be just as effective as physical force. 37. The use of deception in prison fights is a common tactic, with some inmates using lies or manipulation to gain an advantage over their opponents. In one case, an inmate pretended to befriend another inmate, only to turn on him during a fight and deliver a surprise attack. The fight was fueled by betrayal and a desire to assert dominance, and it left the victim with serious injuries. The incident highlighted the importance of trust and the consequences of misplaced loyalty in a world where deception is often the norm. 38. The role of luck in prison fights cannot be underestimated, with some inmates surviving brutal encounters simply by being in the right place at the right time. In one case, an inmate was saved from a potentially deadly fight when guards intervened at the last moment. The incident served as a reminder that in prison, survival often depends on factors beyond one's control, and that even the most prepared individuals can fall victim to chance. 39. The use of strategy in prison fights is a key factor in determining the outcome, with some inmates using careful planning and tactics to outmaneuver their opponents. In one case, an inmate lured his rival into a secluded area under the pretense of a truce, only to ambush him with a group of allies. The fight was short but brutal, leaving the rival with serious injuries and the perpetrator with a reputation for cunning and ruthlessness. The incident highlighted the importance of strategy in a world where brute force is not always enough. 40. The long-term impact of prison fights extends beyond the individuals involved, affecting the entire prison system and society as a whole. Inmates who survive these brutal encounters often carry the scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of their lives, while those who do not leave behind grieving families and a legacy of violence. The cycle of retribution and violence perpetuated by prison fights serves as a stark reminder of the need for reform. But in a system where resources are limited and tensions run high, change is often slow to come. Until then, the savage fights that determine who survives will continue to be a grim reality of prison life. 41. The dynamics of prison fights often reflect the broader societal issues that inmates bring with them into the system. Many prisoners come from backgrounds rife with violence, poverty, and trauma, and these experiences shape their behavior behind bars. In one instance, an inmate who had grown up in a war-torn country brought his survival instincts into the prison yard, engaging in fights that were as much about asserting dominance as they were about coping with unresolved trauma. His confrontations were brutal and calculated, often leaving his opponents with severe injuries. For him, fighting was not just a means of survival but a way to reclaim a sense of control in an environment that mirrored the chaos of his past. 42. The role of prison staff in preventing or escalating fights is a contentious issue. While some guards work diligently to maintain order, others are accused of either ignoring violence or actively encouraging it. In one notorious case, a guard was found to have orchestrated a fight between two rival gang members as a form of entertainment. The fight, which took place in a secluded area of the prison, was allowed to continue until one inmate was nearly beaten to death. The incident sparked an investigation, but the guard faced minimal consequences, leaving inmates feeling even more vulnerable and distrustful of those meant to protect them. 43. The psychological preparation for a prison fight is often as intense as the physical preparation. Inmates who know they are about to face a confrontation often spend hours, if not days, mentally preparing themselves for the violence ahead. In one case, an inmate who had been challenged to a fight spent the night before meditating and visualizing his victory. When the fight finally occurred, his mental discipline gave him an edge over his opponent, who was more impulsive and less focused. The fight ended with the meditative inmate emerging victorious, proving that in prison, the mind can be just as powerful as the body. 44. The use of environmental factors in prison fights is a common tactic, with inmates using their surroundings to gain an advantage. In one instance, an inmate lured his opponent into a slippery shower area, where the wet floors made it difficult for the other man to maintain his footing. The fight was short but brutal, with the aggressor using the environment to his advantage, delivering a series of devastating blows before his opponent could regain his balance. The incident highlighted the importance of situational awareness in a world where every detail can mean the difference between victory and defeat. 45. The aftermath of a prison fight often leads to a shift in the power dynamics within the facility. Inmates who emerge victorious gain respect and fear, while those who lose are often relegated to the bottom of the social hierarchy. In one case, an inmate who had been a low-ranking member of a gang rose to prominence after defeating a higher-ranking member in a brutal fight. The victory not only elevated his status within the gang, but also earned him the loyalty of other inmates who saw him as a rising leader. The loser, on the other hand, was ostracized and eventually transferred to another facility to escape the constant harassment. 46. The role of weapons in prison fights cannot be overstated, as they often turn what would be a simple brawl into a life-threatening encounter. In one case, an inmate used a shank made from a sharpened piece of metal to stab his opponent multiple times during a fight in the yard. The attack was so swift and vicious that the victim collapsed within seconds, bleeding profusely. The aggressor was immediately subdued by guards, but the damage had been done, and the victim was left with permanent injuries. The incident served as a grim reminder of the deadly potential of improvised weapons in prison. 47. The use of psychological manipulation in prison fights is a common tactic, with inmates often trying to break their opponent's will before the fight even begins. In one case, an inmate spread rumors that his opponent had been talking to the authorities, branding him a snitch. The label alone was enough to make the other inmate a target, and when the fight finally occurred, he was already mentally defeated. The aggressor used this psychological advantage to dominate the fight, leaving his opponent humiliated and broken. The incident highlighted the power of perception in a world where reputation